GCSE English Literature, Power and Conflict Poetry, SMARTPATH Tutoring. Tissue. Exposure, Imtiaz Darker. The poem in a nutshell. Tissue. Context, written by Imtiaz Darker, a contemporary poet born in Pakistan and raised in Scotland. She often writes about identity, freedom, and the way we map our lives. Tissue was published in her 2006 collection, The Terrorist at My Table, which explores how we try to create order and security in an unstable world. The plot. The poem isn't a story, but an extended metaphor. It begins by talking about thin paper, like the pages of a Quran or a Bible, and how it can alter things. It then explores different types of paper, maps, receipts, and building plans. Finally, it shifts to human skin, living tissue, suggesting that we should build our lives out of things that are fragile and transparent, rather than hard, permanent structures. Main message: human power is temporary and fragile, just like paper. We try to build great marks and monoliths out of stone and brick to feel powerful, but Darker argues that the real power lies in the tissue of human life and spirit. It suggests that transparency and acceptance of our own fragility would make the world a better place. Key symbolism. The word tissue has a double meaning. It refers to the thin paper used in books and maps, and the biological living tissue of the human body. Light represents truth, God, or nature, which shines through the things we try to build, proving that nature and time is stronger than humans. Key ideas. Tissue. Fragility versus power. Darker uses paper as a metaphor for human power. Just as a knife of wind destroys soldiers in exposure, light in tissue breaks through the rigid structures humans build. It proves that the things we think are strong, buildings, maps, borderlines, are actually as fragile as fine slips of paper, and that nature and time is stronger than humans. The physiological toll of control. The poem explores our obsession with maps and receipts, our attempt to track and control the world. The shriveling of spirits and exposure is mirrored here by the way humans become restricted by the things they script and border. Darker suggests that our desire for permanence is a burden, whereas transparent tissue allows for freedom. The inadequacy of human constructs. The poem suggests that the pride leads to downfall. When we build out of stone and brick, these monoliths are presented as inferior to things that can drift or fold, like the abandoned soldiers who feel the doors are closed. The rigid structures of society are destined to fail because they cannot adapt like living tissue does. The cycle of transience. The poem moves from the sepia of old books to living tissue, suggesting that life is an endless cycle of creation and decay. The but nothing happens in exposure finds a counterpart in the way paper thins to be transparent. It mocks the idea of glorious, permanent monuments, showing that irony exposes the rulers' foolishness in thinking they can build something that daylight will eventually dissolve. Structure of the poem. 10 stanzas of varying length. Unlike the rigid, repetitive quintets of exposure, the stanzas here are mostly short and irregular. This reflects the fluidity and fragility of paper and life, suggesting that human existence shouldn't be forced into rigid or monotonous shapes. Unrhymed free verse with enjambments. Darker avoids a fixed rhyme scheme, allowing sentences to drift across the stanzas enjambment. This creates a sense of freedom and transparency, mirroring how light shines through paper and how human living tissue should not be restricted by borders. Lack of caesura and a fast pace. While exposure uses stops to create a slow, dragging pace, tissue flows quickly. This mimics the fleeting nature of time and the ease with which paper and human power can be turned into your skin, emphasizing that life is a continuous moving process. The final standalone line. The poem ends with the single line, "Turn into your skin." This replaces the "but nothing happens" refrain with a final, powerful realization. It emphasizes that everything we build, histories, maps, and wealth, ultimately comes down to the fragile, individual human rather than the monoliths of the state. Context of the poem. Fragility of human life. Darker wrote the poem to explore how fragile human constructs are compared to nature. Just as Owen focused on the misery of the salient, Darker focused on the pity of human pride, the way we try to build permanent monoliths and grand designs in a world that is fundamentally temporary. Global Conflict and Borders. Published in the collection The Terrorist at My Table, 2006. The poem reflects the post-9 world. It critiques the maps and borderlines that cause conflict. Suggests that if we saw these borders, these boundaries as fragile slips of paper, we would realize that human power is temporary. Islamic and cultural identity. The paper, thin by age, alludes to sacred texts like the Quran. Darker uses the image of light, a common symbol for the divine or truth, to show that spiritual truth shines through the physical world. This proves that pride leads to downfall when we prioritize brick and stone over human tissue. Post-structuralist perspective. Written in a modern era of rapid change, the poem acts as a critique of fixed structures. It is an attempt to tell the truth about the darkness of materialism, urging the reader to embrace transparency and the living tissue of humanity rather than the dead structures of money and politics. Tissue poem. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper, thin by age or touching. The kind you find in a well-used books. The back of the Quran, where a hand has written in the names and histories. Who was born to who? The height and weight. Who died where and how? On which sepia date? Pages smoothed and stroked and turned. Transparent with attention. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh. A shift in the direction of the wind. Maps too. The sun shines through their borderlines. The marks that rivers make. Roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Fine slips from grocery shops. That say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card. Might fly our lives like paper kites. An architect could use all the place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block. But let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make, find a way to trace a grand design, with living tissue raise a structure, never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked and thin, to be transparent, turn into your skin. Line by line analysis. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. The method, symbolism and metaphors. Analysis, light represents truth, God or nature. The fact that paper allows light to shine through suggests that transparency and fragility are more powerful than solid opaque structures like brick. Paper thin by age or touching. Method, tactile imagery. Analysis suggesting that things become more valuable and transparent as they are handled by humans. It emphasizes the beauty in wear and tear over pride and newness. The back of the Quran, where a hand has written in the names and histories. The method here is allusion. Synecdoche. Analysis references a sacred text but focuses on the hand. Humanity. It shows that human history and family lineage are scripted onto paper, giving it a weight beyond its physical strength. Who was born to who? The height of the whole. The date. The pages smoothed and stroked and turned, transparent with attention. The method here is polis syndeton and. Analysis. The repetition of and creates a gentle rhythmic pace, mirroring the repetitive loving act of handling a family book. Transparent with attention suggests that we only truly see the light when we care for our history. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh. The method here is personification and modal verbs. Might. Analysis suggests that our solid world is an illusion. A sigh, human breath is enough to knock down buildings, proving that human power is temporary. A shift in the direction of the wind. Method here is nature imagery. Analysis, similar to exposure, nature, the wind, is the ultimate force. It shows that human structures are at the mercy of the natural world. Maps 2. The sun shines through their borderlines. The method here is symbolism. The analysis. Nature, the sun, does not recognize man-made borders. This proves that irony exposes the ruler's foolishness. We draw lines to divide people, but they are just ink on fragile paper. The marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain falls. The method here is a synthetic list. Analysis blurs the line between natural features, rivers, and man-made ones, roads. Everything is reduced to a fold in the paper, making human achievements seem small. Find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid to whom. Method mundane imagery. Analysis shifts from the sacred Quran to the trivial receipts. It shows how paper controls our lives through debt and credit, creating a shriveling of human freedom. For daily eye-cats never wish to keep, and yet these frailties fill the lives of men like paper kites. The method here is simile. Analysis. Paper kite suggests that humans are held by a string of paper, money, and contracts. We think we are flying high, but we are fragile and easily controlled by frailties. An architect could use all this, place layer over layer, luminous script and numbers over line. The method here is semantic field of design. And the analysis represents the human desire to create grand designs and order. Luminous suggests that even in our cold numbers, there is a search for light and truth. And never wish to build with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. The method here is plosive alliteration and contrast. Analysis. The harsh B sounds represent the heavy, stubborn nature of brick, monoliths, and capitals. They represent state power. The daylight nature breaks through them, proving nature and time is stronger than humans. Through the shapes that pride can make. The method here is an abstract noun, pride. Analysis directly states that pride leads to downfall. Our buildings are not built for function, but for our own ego. Find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue, raise a structure never meant to last. The method here is metaphor and oxymoron. Analysis darker suggests we shall build our lives like tissue, flexible and temporary. A structure never meant to last is the opposite of a monolith, embracing the truth that human power is temporary. Of paper smooth and stroked and thin to be transparent. The method here is repetition and sibilance. The analysis, it links back to the start of the poem. The goal of life is to become transparent, to have no borderlines or blockades, and let the light shine through. Turned into your skin. The method here is direct address and standalone line. The analysis, the twist ending. The poem isn't about paper, it's about you. Our skin is the ultimate tissue. It is fragile. It records our history, scars and wrinkles, and it's the only structure that truly matters. Section analysis. Lines 1 to 12, the power of history. What happens? The speaker introduces the idea that thin paper, specifically the tissue of sacred books like the Quran, can alter things. It describes how these pages are handled with care, recording family histories, births and deaths. The effect/meaning. This establishes paper as something fragile yet spiritually and historically powerful. It suggests that light, truth or God is more likely to be found in old, transparent things than in solid, opaque ones. It proves that the grand design of a family's history is more enduring than physical structures. Techniques to highlight: symbolism, light, tactile imagery, smoothed and stroked, polysyndeton, the repetition of an and. Lines 13 to 24. The fragility of control. What happens? The speaker imagines what would happen if our solid buildings were made of paper, moving in the wind. The focus then shifts to maps, where the sun shines through man-made borderlines and mountain falls. The effect and meaning. By comparing massive buildings to drift, Darker highlights that human power is temporary. The sun shining through borderlines proves that irony exposes the ruler's foolishness. We draw lines to claim territory, but nature, the sun, treats them as if they don't exist. Techniques to highlight personification, fall away on a sigh, nature imagery, sun shines through. Lines 25 to 36. The script of commerce. What happens? The poem looks at everyday paper, buying slips, receipts from grocery shops. These slips record what was paid to whom, and the speaker compares these minor frailties to paper kites. The effects and meaning. This section shows how paper controls our lives through money and debt. The paper kites simile suggests that while we think we are free, we are actually tethered and controlled by the fragile tissue of credit and commerce. It highlights the physiological weight of our grand designs. Techniques to highlight simile like paper kites, mundane imagery, grocery shops. Lines 37 to 52. The architecture of humanity. What happens? The speaker calls for an architect to stop building with brick or block and instead build with living tissue. The poem concludes with the revelation that this tissue is actually the reader's own skin. The effects and meaning of this is the moral climax, darker critiques, monoliths, symbols of state pride, and suggests that we should raise a structure never meant to last. It proves that pride leads to downfall and that the ultimate grand design is the human body and spirit, which is fragile, transparent, and mortal. Techniques to highlight here. Plosive alliteration, brick or block, metaphor, living tissue, direct address, your skin. Overall interpretation. Imtiaz Darker's tissue explores the profound disconnect between the solid material structures humans use to project power and the fragile, translucent reality of human existence. Through a fluid, fragmented structure and the extended metaphor of paper, the poem depicts human constructs such as capitals, monoliths, and borderlines as humbled, temporary figures that are ultimately altered by the pervasive and merciless power of light and time. The poem suggests that the desire for permanence leaves an indelible mark of arrogance on the world, transforming the living tissue of humanity into rigid monoliths that fail to offer true security. By the end, the realization that we should raise a structure never meant to last reveals a bitter truth, that human power is temporary and pride leads to downfall, as our grand designs are dissolved by the daylight rather than by physical force. The transparent nature of the final realization confirms that nature and time is stronger than humans, leaving the reader in a state of permanent, clear-eyed understanding that irony exposes the ruler's foolishness, showing that the glory of stone and brick is a lie that ends in a simple mortal reality of your skin. Comparison checklist for essays. Tissue. The fragility of identity, unlike the ice on the soul and exposure, tissue suggests our identity is as thin as paper, easily thinned by age or touching. Light as the antagonist. Just as Owen used the iced east wings, Darker uses light and daylight as forces that break through human pride, proving nature's dominance. The futility of borders, the maps in tissue mirrors the barbed wires in exposure. Both are man-made attempts to divide and control that nature ultimately ignores. Transparency versus numbness. While Owen's soldiers end with eyes or ice, dead and unfeeling, Darker subject ends as transparent, enlightened, and honest, the temporary monolith. Both poems conclude that status and capitals are shriveled by time, whether it's a soldier in a hole or a monolith of brick. All are reduced to their biological living tissue. Comparisons with extract from the prelude. Comparisons with Ozymandias' tissue similarities. The fragility of human ego. Both poems explore how easily human arrogance is shattered. In Ozymandias, the sneer of cold command is buried in sand, in tissue. The shapes that pride can make are broken down by daylight, proving pride leads to downfall. The dominance of nature. Both poets use the landscape to show that nature and time is stronger than humans. Shelley uses the lone and level sands to swallow a kingdom, while Darker uses the sun that shines through borderlines to swallow man-made maps and monoliths. The use of irony. Irony exposes the ruler's foolishness in both texts. Ozymandias claims to be king of kings while standing as a wreck, just as the capitals and the grand designs in tissue are revealed to be as flimsy as fine slips of paper when compared to the reality of living tissue. Differences: static versus fluid power. In Ozymandias, nature's power is a slow, eroding force in stone. In tissue, power is fluid and drifts. Darker suggests that the most powerful thing is not what is built, but what is transparent, and can alter things by letting light through. Political versus philosophical. Shelley's poem is a political critique of a specific tyrant. Darker's poem is a philosophical exploration of the grand design of existence, focusing on the universal living tissue of humanity rather than the fall of one specific leader. The timescale. Ozymandias looks at the surviving ruins of a dead civilization to show power is temporary. Tissue focuses on the present and the future, urging the reader to build structures never meant to last, to avoid the shriveled fate of those who rely on brick or block. Comparison with exposure. Tissue similarities. The pity of pride. Both poems suggest that human power is temporary. In exposure, the soldier's pride is crushed by the merciless wind. In tissue, monoliths and capitals are broken by daylight, proving that human constructs cannot withstand the natural world. Nature as dominant force. Both poets use the environment to humble humanity. Owen uses pale flakes and ice winds to defeat soldiers, while Darker uses the sun and the wind to show how easily man-made buildings and maps fall away on the side. The inadequacy of man-made structures. In both poems, man-made defences fail. The doors are closed on the soldiers in exposure as they freeze in mud, mirroring how the brick or block structures in tissue are insufficient compared to living tissue and transparent truth. Differences: conflict versus creation. Exposure is set in the misery of a literal battlefield where nothing happens, but death, tissue, is set in a world of creation and design, focusing on how we script our lives and whether we choose to build with pride or transparency. Numbness versus transparency. Owen's soldiers end with eyes or ice, representing a loss of soul and feeling. Darker subject ends with skin that is deemed to be transparent, representing an opening up of the soul and a connection to the light. Rigid versus fragile form. Exposure uses a rigid 8-stanza structure to show the monotonous wait for death. Tissue uses fragmented, flowing stanzas to show the drift of life, suggesting that fragility is a strength while rigidity is a weakness. Key quotes to revise for tissue. Paper that lets the light shine through is what could alter things. Symbolism and metaphor. Light represents truth, nature, or the divine. The fact that paper is transparent is presented as a greater power than being solid, proving that nature and time is stronger than human brick. The sun shines through their borderlines. Personification and imagery. Nature. The sun ignores the pride of man-made maps. This proves that irony exposes the ruler's foolishness in thinking that ink lines on paper can truly divide or control the earth. Fine slips that say how much was sold fill the lives of men like paper kites. Simile suggests that humans are tethered and controlled by fragile material things like money and receipts. It highlights the physiological toll of materialistic grand designs that keep us from being truly free. Let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. Plosive, alliteration, and metaphor. The harsh B sounds of brick or block contrasts with the daylight truth that easily shatters state power. This proves human power is temporary, as even the grandest monoliths are eventually dissolved by time, then to be transparent, turned into your skin. Direct address and metaphor. The final shift from paper to living tissue humbles the reader. It forces the realization that the individual human body is the ultimate structure, and its fragility is more significant than any pride or monuments. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications on and like the video. Thank you very much.